Today is a big day for the whole world, for the US, and for Ukraine. It is the inauguration day of the newly elected president of the US. And Ukraine House will open its first panel discussion with the US-Ukraine dialogue. Aligning interests, the US, Ukraine, and the path to a just and sustainable peace. And it is my great pleasure to invite to the stage the moderator of this panel, Daniel Rande, Senior Vice President, Schreyer Chair in Global Analysis, Center for Strategic and International Studies, who will introduce the speakers. Have a great discussion.
Hi, thank you so
Welcome.
much. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's an honor. It's an honor to be here. I'm also wearing the hat. I'm very proud to be associated with the Ukraine, Moldova, America Enterprise Fund. I'm on the board, one of the sponsors of Ukraine House Davos. So it's a privilege and an honor to be the moderator of this discussion. Ukraine is an enormous business opportunity for the world. It's got $26 trillion of minerals. In my time understanding and learning about Ukraine, the economy is hands, brains, and grains. And so hands is manufacturing, brains is tech, including AI, and grains. It's an enormous, I'd also probably add a fourth one in drones, or so we'll have to come up with a fourth one for defense tech as its own incredible part of the future of Ukraine. We have a number of really great panelists to help unpack Ukraine as an opportunity for the world. And so I'm going to ask several people to join me on stage. First is my friend Andy Hunder, who is the Executive Director of the American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine. Andy, come on down. Got a fourth chair. Yeah, okay. I don't know what Andy's secret is. He looks like $1 million, but he's you look at this. So, and then I'd like to have Ambassador Kurt Volker. Please come on down. Ambassador Volker, thanks for being here. And then we have Dora Chomiak, who is the CEO of Razum for Ukraine. Dora. And then on pinch hitting, we have Admiral Mike Hewitt. Thanks, Admiral Hewitt, for on short notice being with us. The CEO of IP3. So great. So don't take it from me that Ukraine is an incredible opportunity. I think we're going to unpack this thesis with these really distinguished and thoughtful panelists. I want to first start with Andy Hunder, who I've learned so much about the Ukrainian business landscape from Andy. So Andy, tell us, when I say Ukraine is a business opportunity, I certainly think you agree with that, but tell us a little bit about you. You have over 600 members. You've added 60 members in the last 12 months. Being part of the AmCham in Ukraine is I think it's fair to say, the most prestigious business organization in Ukraine. You can't just say, I want to join. You got to get past a very tough set of stringent standards to join. So you guys have added some really fine companies. So the best companies in Ukraine are members of AmCham. So tell us about your members, what they're doing, how they see Ukraine as an opportunity currently and in the future.
Well, thank you, Dan, and it's great to be here. And thank you to Ukraine House Davos for putting all this together. I think this just shows the significant role and that business plays in Ukraine during the full-scale war. I mean, even this place where we are today, it's business that's brought it all together. Yes. And business has made this happen. So Lena and all the team, thank you for making this happen. I think the message is that Ukraine is open for business. And we're approaching February and the 4th year of the full-scale war. And we see that Ukraine is open for business. We see our members. McDonald's have served 95 million customers in Ukraine last year alone. They had a hit 36 hours before the inauguration, a Russian ballistic missile did hit the restaurant. I remember that opening in 1997. McDonald's, I think the message, and the safety procedures were all in place. They managed to evacuate all the staff. All the staff are safe into the shelters as the air raid sirens. But the fact that they are there, they're open. They've opened 20 new restaurants during the full-scale war.
Sorry, let me just underline that. They've opened 22 restaurants in the last 3 years.
Brand new restaurants, and they keep renewing. When you arrive in Kyiv, now it's at the Kyiv Central Rail Station, the McDonald's restaurant at the Central Kyiv has been one of the busiest in the world. It's just the amount of traffic, the amount of till customers coming through, and that just shows, and they've just renovated that again. So it's companies like that, the Coca-Cola plant in just outside Kyiv, one of the biggest in the world. And we see, why and the role of business, even before that first missile hit on the 24th, when they started attacking Kyiv. American business already was fighting. We had, the war started, it wasn't the missile, it was the digital attacks. Microsoft were already fighting the digital attacks, the cyber attacks. And I think it's phenomenal. And that's why Ukraine has continued to stand, because we have the technology, the cyber, the internet continues to work. The technology that has kept the banks operating, so companies like Visa, like MasterCard, like Citibank. We were preparing for the war, we took out paper money because
Amazon.
we were told, we were told buy paper maps because nothing's going to work. Everything has continued to work seamlessly. And as you say, Dan, sort of companies like Amazon, AWS, and Microsoft, and Google, if during World War II, the safest place for critical infrastructure was underground, to bury it in the tunnels, today the safest place is up in the cloud. And that's where it is. And that's why we have these seamless services. And even like with Elon Musk, I think with what SpaceX has done and with Starlink, you speak to any soldier and you understand how important Starlink communications is on the front line. And that continues. And I think communications, it has continued, and it's a seamless communication. So the communications, the banking sector, we see agriculture with ABCDs. We see here Bunge, ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Dreyfus. They have continued to operate. That Black Sea, the ports, the deep water ports, the commodities coming out of Ukraine, the sunflower oil, the wheat, the corn, that continues to operate during a full-scale war. And we've seen...
And the economy grew last year.
The economy grew last year, 3.6%. And we see... but I think one sector that I would like to highlight more than any is what we've seen in security and defense. This war has changed warfare globally. I think what we see in the innovation coming out, especially in the drones and in other sectors of security and defense, we've established a brand new security and defense committee. And we see Boeing today Boeing has 1,400 people working in Kyiv. They continue to operate. We see many, many new companies in the defense sector coming to Ukraine, learning. The AI, marrying this AI and technology and drone technology. This is the future of warfare globally.
And Ukraine's on the cutting edge of it.
Ukraine has unmatched sort of expertise, knowledge, and really, I think that is a key sector which we are seeing. So, the message is that Ukraine's open for business. American business today operates in Ukraine. American business has had a significant role in supporting Ukraine during this.
And a big part of Ukraine's future is, in addition to tech, agriculture, manufacturing, is the defense industrial base is being built as we speak.
Absolutely. And I think, the brands, we used to love, some of the biggest American brands used to be on the shelves of the supermarkets. Today, probably the most loved American brands are like Patriot missiles that save, they save lives. They keep Ukrainians alive. And I think this whole tech sector, it just shows how much is happening today and how much there is opportunity moving forward.
All right, so I've gotten a lot smarter about Ukraine in the last several years. I've learned a lot from many of the folks in this audience. But one of the things I've taken away from being a student of Ukraine is the importance of Ukraine joining the European Union. Now, when I say that in the United States, like, European Union, why does that matter? Well, what I explain to American audiences, what would you do to join the coolest fraternity on campus? What hazing would you put up with? What reforms would you do to join the coolest fraternity on campus? But it's more than that, because when they join the European Union, then the gusher of money is going to flow. They're going to build railroads and bridges and roads and infrastructure. They're getting some of that now, but when you join the European Union, a tsunami of money comes with it, but also sort of the membership has its privileges as well, right? So talk about where is Ukraine in its technically complicated process. There's all these funny terms. There's all this Euro speak for it. But the important thing is, like, where is it in its process, and what is your guess as to how long it'll take for them to join the European Union?
So we as the AmCham, one of our key pillars is the B2G, being the voice
Yeah.
of business to government. And whenever there's any legislation that's being reviewed in Parliament, there's a tick box that says, is this important for Ukraine's
Yeah.
accession to the EU? And we see that is. And I think this is going to be another major opportunity for Ukraine, already being a candidate country. And we see what's happened next door.
For the last 12 months, they got the official invite more than 12 months ago. So they're in the official process. They're not just been invited to the party; they're actually in the party. And
Absolutely. And I think this is a key This
Right.
is a real carrot. This is a
You can
motivation.
dress me up, but you can't take me out, sorry.
where Ukraine is
Yeah.
going on the political front.
if you look at Poland, or you look at Ireland, or you look at Spain, the accession and joining the EU transformed those countries.
Absolutely.
It's going to do the same thing with Ukraine.
Absolutely. I mean, we're in touch with our colleagues in AmCham Poland, AmCham across Europe, and we see the benefits of joining the EU. The benefits, especially for the business.
Okay, so if you're a betting person, could you say the land speed record for joining the European Union is 3 years? Austria joined in 3 years. So my hope is that Ukraine joins within 5. So my hope is that by January the 20th, 2029, at the end of Donald Trump's second term, if I was the Trump administration, I would say the European Union, by January the 20th, 2029, I want to see Ukraine in the EU as part of a deal. Is that, in your mind, could you see that? Is that conceivable? That within 4 years?
I think we are optimistic today on this historic day,
Yeah.
as we see the inauguration of
Yeah.
President Trump. We're excited. We just put out a brand new survey today with Citi. 77% of our members are looking and are excited about the prospects of the US support. We see
So more than 75% are optimistic.
absolutely.
Okay.
Over 60%.
And these are people on the ground.
These are people,
right?
American business on the ground. Over 60% are forecasting a ceasefire in 2025. And I think, we are already... I think
65%?
yes. So I think it's a ceasefire, 2025, with the new administration. And I think with so many business people coming in from business and business people coming for pro-business, I think, we as the AmCham are very much looking forward, working together with this new administration, showing that Ukraine is open for business and it's ripe in opportunity.
75% of AmCham members are optimistic, and 65% think there's going to be a ceasefire. These are people who are on the ground, who have skin in the game in Ukraine. Those are interesting takeaways. Thank you.
This is fresh. This came out
fresh. Right off the press.
Right off the press.
all right.
You're first to hear it.
You're first to hear it. Tweet that out. All right. So Ambassador Volker, there's an elephant in the room, and thanks for being here. I'm thrilled you've joined us. So, okay, you know a lot about security. You were U.S. Ambassador to NATO. You're a serious Atlanticist. You've been an important voice during this time, during this terrible war. What does security look like for Ukraine? I think there are probably a lot of people in the audience who are wondering, what does a new administration mean? Could you talk a little bit? What does security look like? And could you paint a couple pictures of what if you were on the negotiating team with General Kellogg, what do you think's going through their minds, if you could? And just to think a little bit about that, if you could, and I'm also going to come back to Admiral Hewitt, because I know he knows General Kellogg, and we're going to ask him about that as well. But
right. Well, thanks very much, Dan, and thanks, Ukraine House. It's great to be here. I want to, first off, just echo everything that Andy said. I am not at all surprised that's the polling data.
wow.
We are here on, 45 minutes away from President Trump's inauguration. I think that this will have a transformative effect this year. I think that he comes into office with an absolute determination to end the war in Ukraine. I think that he and Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, General Kellogg, I think they're very cognizant that Ukraine wants peace and Russia is the one preventing peace. Russia is the one attacking Ukraine. So they need to get Putin to the point of wanting peace too. That's going to require strength, and if you've heard President Trump over the campaign, and especially since the election, and I am at what was been teased about his speech he's about to give, he's going to emphasize that this is a period of renewal. This is a period of strength. And I think in the case of Ukraine, it is a lot of support aimed at ending the war. Now, timing from President Trump is good. Russia's in a weaker position now than it has been ever since February 22. It has rampant inflation, it has high interest rates, it's printing money, it is spending a good chunk of its foreign reserves and its budget deficit just to support the military. They're losing people off the battlefield at an extraordinary rate. So Putin needs a break. He will never admit it. He will always want to portray strength, but he needs a break. So I'm optimistic that 2025 will be a time when there is a ceasefire. And then you get to your question, Dan. How do you turn a ceasefire into a durable, permanent peace? And the Trump administration right now, I would say, does not have the view that Ukraine should join NATO right away. And so I think they will be largely silent on that. There is discussion ongoing about whether European NATO allies would position training and equipped forces in Ukraine, maybe assisting with air defense. I would call this a deterrent force, not a peacekeeping force. The idea would be to be present enough that Putin doesn't attack again once there's a ceasefire. If this happens, if you have a ceasefire and you have some meaningful security guarantees, better than the Budapest Memorandum, with skin in the game, I think Ukraine is poised to take off. You had a 30% hit in GDP in the first year of the full-scale invasion. GDP grew about 5% the year after. 2023,
last couple of years,
3.6 this year. But it is still pent-up demand and huge opportunity for rapid economic growth once there is a peace of some kind, a ceasefire of some kind. And combining that with being on the EU track is going to give investors a lot of confidence. So the things that will cause the investors confidence is security. The best solution to this, I remain committed to this, is NATO membership as soon as possible. That is the best solution. But if we can't get it right away, we've got to have security anyway. And then the pathway to the EU. I'm not as optimistic as you. I don't think it can be done as quickly as you like. But I think the pathway is there.
If you were a betting person, what's the likely timeline to join the European Union?
I'd say less than 10 years.
Okay.
I think 4 is going to be optimistic, but I'd say less than 10. There is the chapters, the negotiation of the chapters, or the acceptance of the chapters. Then there is implementation, and is making sure that the Ukrainian government, civil service,
I have a vision of Encyclopedia
capital.
Britannica. There's like 27 of these chapters and these really thick, funny named books. I can't pronounce it, but it's super long and complicated.
But as we all know with Ukraine, it's one thing to pass a law. It's another thing to have it implemented and to have your human capital understanding it and carrying it forward and internalizing that. And that's a process. That's not something you do overnight.
Okay, so should this audience come away saying they should feel that the folks who are going to be representing President Trump and his administration are clear-eyed that Ukraine is the wronged party in this, and that Russia caused this, and that they shouldn't have unfounded fears, I guess, is how I'm trying to think about how to frame this. I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Look, I know what you're talking about. There are a lot of people who are worried that Trump is going to undercut Ukraine or to stop providing military assistance or budgetary support or urge Ukraine to accept a deal that signs away territory, signs away future security. I don't see that coming. The reason I don't see that is very simple. That would mean that Putin wins and Trump loses. And that is not what President Trump wants.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So you heard that. You're all heard what I asked him, because I think that's a very important thing to take away. Okay. All right. Great. Thanks. Thanks, Ambassador Volker. Okay, Dora, you're a former business leader. I have a Columbia MBA, and you've changed from being in business to running one of the most successful social enterprises that bridges the United States to Ukraine, sort of like yourself, because you're sort of, you're an American citizen, but you have Ukrainian DNA, and so you're a bridge person, and have been involved. You have 250,000 donors to Rasm for Ukraine. I want you to tell some stories about the human potential in Ukraine. I think one of the things I've been struck by in my 4 visits since the war is the resiliency and the incredible human potential of the country, even during wartime. So I know you talk to all sorts of folks. You talk to business people, you talk to people in the NGO community, you talk to medics, you talk to government folks. So you see the spectrum of society. So I know there's lots to be optimistic about. Tell us about that.
There is, and Dan, thanks for the chance to talk about it. And first, the human potential of people in Ukraine is massive. And a huge thank you to the women-led team that has made Ukraine House at Davos be so successful for so many years. Thank you for bringing us together here to have conversations like this, because this is human potential. And I want to tell you 3 stories about the work that Razum does that showcases precisely this human potential, because we don't look at it.
Okay.
We live it every single day. Right now at Razum, we work across 5 programs. There's about 100 people full-time in Ukraine, about another 40 in the United States. We work day in and day out. And it's these Ukrainians that you were just describing. So 3 concrete examples I want to take you through today. First is something that we've been working with since 2016. So back in 2016, we saw the opportunity for Ukrainian surgeons and American surgeons to learn from each other. And we called it the co-pilot project, because they're co-piloting surgeries. That program now includes Dr. Sirko, who works at the Mechnikov Hospital in Dnipro. Check your geography, that's about 100 kilometers from the front. What they're seeing at Mechnikov now is a massive amount of traumas to the head. Now, the West and the United States, and specifically, combat medics haven't had to deal with head traumas, because for the past many conflicts, US has had air superiority. So now suddenly, doctors in Ukraine are figuring out ways to save lives with these new injuries caused by the drones, and coming up with new protocols that immediately save lives, but that's not enough. What we're doing together with the co-pilot project is documenting those new protocols and getting them published in medical journals. So this is just one example of people in Ukraine figuring things out faster and sharing it with the other good guys around the world. And that's very much how we operate. Another example is, since the full-scale invasion, of course, we got involved in getting IFACs. Everyone's seen one of these, right? It's full of medical equipment. So we started doing that too, and then we pretty quickly shifted. Instead of procuring this from all over the world, we started working with manufacturers in Ukraine. So last year, about 35% of our procurement of aid to the front was made in Ukraine. So this is, you can check it out later, super high quality, several iterations, IFACs that's done. My purse is also made in Ukraine, but that's another awesome project. It's fabulous.
That's even more important.
It's been two years of walking around, thank you, and it still works really well. Both of these bags are amazing. But what you may not know about is radios. There's a company called Chimera Radios, and these guys, the founder is like 20-something. They figured out some way to create a radio that the Russians can't jam. Okay?
Love it.
There's another company, probably represented here somewhere, that also is in that market. Where does Razum fit into all of this? We were getting information that from medics on the front that they needed to communicate with each other faster, and the other radios were not working for them. I'm not going to get into why. Chimera had some product in the market, but they didn't have enough money to scale. So we took our donor funds and purchased a chunk of these They put them in the market, classic Ukraine human potential way. People start using them. People start immediately giving feedback. Hey, this is working, this is not working. Guess what? Second generation comes out super fast after that. We were able to buy another big purchase of that. As a result, a section of the U.S. Air Force, sorry, I know you're a Navy guy, but a research arm of the U.S. Air Force is now working with these radios to figure out how they can use them. Again, this thing didn't exist 12 months ago. It's happening now. So yet another example of human potential. I don't think they're members of AmCham yet, but I can put in a word.
Send them our way.
It's,
Send them our
it's
way.
a very stringent process. It's not easy.
Is it like the EU where you need like
yeah,
an encyclopedia?
it's something like that.
There's one more example I want to take us through, which is which is something that you don't necessarily see if you're not going to the newly deoccupied territories or really on the front, and that's these grassroots organizations. I mean, thousands of these groups were created in the last few years, but even civil society in Ukraine has been developing, I don't have to tell this crowd, for a while now. But we look at these as social enterprises. So Razum has been able to invest almost $8 million over the past several years in 200 of these organizations, hyper-local, super grassroots, filling the needs in the communities that others aren't. And so these are the people, now we're working on helping them develop a network among themselves so they can help each other out and continue to grow. Because right now, and certainly once there's a ceasefire, and certainly once there's a just peace, these are the citizens that are going to be building the fabric of the community that build the country, that build the businesses, that are represented in government, that continue to work in the private sector. So I have the privilege of seeing this every single day. My colleagues are incredible in Ukraine and all around the world, and I'm happy to introduce you to any of them whenever
Great.
appropriate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Admiral Hewitt, thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this on short notice and stepping in additional public service. Thank you for saying yes. You're a co-founder and CEO of IP3, a very fine company that I encourage people to get to know. So, Admiral, I want you to talk about two things. I want you to talk about why you see IP3 sees Ukraine as an opportunity. You have several areas of focus in Ukraine. But knowing that you have a personal relationship with General Kellogg, I'd like you to provide a little bit of color commentary for this audience who don't know General Kellogg. Could you talk a little bit about your conversations with them to the extent you feel comfortable doing that? But just so that, because I think that's one of the things that's out here is like, what's the future hold? And obviously you're here because you see Ukraine as an opportunity, and so I think you know things other folks don't, and so I'd welcome your comments on both of those.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks for having me again. It's great to be back at Ukraine House again this year. I think, let me start with what's different since Election Day to today. Prior to Election Day, it was Biden's war, it was a costly war, it was a never-ending war. And there really wasn't the ends, ways, and means to bring it to a conclusion. There wasn't going to be a winner and a loser. There was just going to be two losers. And that was kind of the framing conversation in Washington, D.C., the southern border versus Ukraine. Why am I supporting Ukraine and not the southern border? The idea of Ukraine was lost in political fighting and infighting. What you now have is a conversation about stopping the fighting and then a sustainable peace. And that is where I think you're going to see what I call the economic miracle of Ukraine will begin. That conversation, frankly, would not have happened in another Biden term. But with President Trump, and as much as the media tries to portray him as an ally of Putin, in fact, he's an ally of sovereignty and peace and stability and Western democracy. And what he is going to invest in are the commercial upsides of a stable and prosperous Ukraine. We're involved in energy programs. We're involved in land restoration programs. I'm involved with critical minerals of Ukraine, which everybody knows is really going to become, and already is, the oil of Saudi Arabia in terms of a global influence around the world. It has the added benefit of helping us get out from underneath Russia and China influence in energy. Energy sovereignty is the Westphalian principle of the 21st century. Putin has proved it. He bombs energy infrastructure in Ukraine. He's not taking territory. He's terrorizing and taking out energy infrastructure to draw Ukraine into a weakened position at the bargaining table, and Trump will have none of it. From a General Kellogg perspective, very seasoned warfighter, a man that understands winning the war is one thing, but holding the peace is even more important. And I think the conversations that I've listened to and the people that are involved in this conversation are ones that I have great trust and faith in. This is not about giving territory to Putin. And there are great analogies out there. And America, frankly, has done a horrible job, really since South Korea, at winning the peace. And so what we're echoing throughout Washington and throughout the investment community is that Ukraine will become a South Korea-like ally of America, where we will grow industries in Ukraine that we can't grow in America. And I've deemed it the economic miracle that is about to happen. And then the last thing I will say, and these are the messages that we're providing to the Trump team, why does Ukraine matter? And I had a great conversation with Mark Burnett, who's going in to be the next ambassador to the United Kingdom. And, you know, he comes from a branding background. Yeah. He comes from a messaging background. And he asked me, well, why does Ukraine matter? And I said, well, it's 1950s America. It's husband, wife, children, picket fence, multi-generational families, things that we want back in our country again. They're very values-based. Second, Christian Orthodox, 86, 87%, a very religious country, a country that cares greatly about its neighbors and about its friends and family. And then third is this unbelievable engineering, AI, innovation, ingenuity to fight for your country because no one else was helping you. And I think those are the things that we're looking at as investable opportunities. And I think the very last thing I'll say is make America great again is the term that you hear, or drill baby drill, these things. Those are bumper stickers. They're really not that meaningful. But I think what Trump would say is, I can't care about my country. If I don't care about my country, I can't care about yours. So by making America the country it needs to be on the world stage, I believe it will help Ukraine achieve the prosperity they need.
So I've seen numbers like $26 trillion in mineral assets in the ground in Ukraine. I've seen, so I think there's an enormous opportunity, and you're looking at this. You're also looking at, I think there's several other sectors you're looking at. Would you care to just share a little bit about those?
Well, for us, I got involved trying to help the war effort by bringing top-of-the-line demining equipment to Ukraine for the warfighter. And that was very challenging because a lot of capital can't support the war, but they can certainly support things like land restoration or human capital development. So many of the programs we started, we kind of shifted to ones that were more investable with debt, with grant money, with concessional capital that all want to come to Ukraine, but much of it is precluded from participating in the conflict. So what we focused on are investable things that actually help win the war, but not as a direct missile sale or things like that. And then the final area that I'm involved in is investing in the defense tech, both with credit and equity. And we're shamelessly calling it the Victory Fund because we think you need to invest in these things to help victory. And I think you said it earlier, Dan, whether we're in NATO or not, whether we're in the EU or not, whether we need to rebuild certain parts of the defense industrial base, I think the area that Ukraine needs to be non-negotiable in is its own defense sovereignty. In other words, you're right, and we did not provide air cover. We would have never fought this war as an American military without air superiority, but we asked Ukraine to do it. So what I want to focus in on as soon as the peace agreement comes into play is rebuilding the defense industrial base of Ukraine so that it doesn't depend upon NATO. It doesn't depend upon America. It can fight and defend its own country. And that's going to be the same thing that happens throughout NATO. Every one of these NATO nations has woken up to the fact that they are under-resourced for the war against Russia. And the one thing that Trump does understand is that Putin will violate whatever agreement is going to be drafted. And he's already planning how he's going to violate it. So President Trump is not naive in terms of who he's dealing with.
Great. I don't know if we have a microphone for the audience because I want to call on. I see several people. I'm going to just tell them ahead of time. I want to hear from former Deputy Secretary Began. I want to hear from my son Christina. Whaler from the Temerity Fund. Yes, I want you to hear about what's going to happen with the new government in Canada and what that means for Ukraine. And then I want to hear from Anders Aslan. So Sweden used to be neutral, and now it's a member of NATO. This is a direct result of Ukraine. So I want to hear from the three of you, and then I want to hear from the rest of the audience. But I want to add that you have a homework assignment, panelists, for the end, which is I'm giving you guys a chance to each think about what you're going to say. But I want you to each, at the end, I'm going to ask you what's the biggest opportunity for Ukraine in the next 1 to 3 years? What's the biggest? Each of you at the end, I want you to come to that. Do we have a microphone? We have a microphone? Okay, is there a... Okay, maybe this is... Okay, see if it works. It is, okay. Anders Aslan, I'm going to start with you. Then I want to hear from former Deputy Secretary Began, and then from... Christine, you can thank me for this later, Christine. I'm sure you're thrilled. I'm cold calling on you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. I will not talk about the economy, but really of the security of Northern Europe. And what has happened recently is a fundamental change. You now see the Nordic Baltic 8, the 5 Nordic countries and the 3 Baltic countries, and they have exactly the same view. You can say that this is the view of Estonia and Lithuania that the Nordic countries have adopted. And now they quite often have meetings together with Poland. So it might be a Northern European 9 countries. What do these countries have in common? Security policy, defense policy, they are now arming as fast as just possible. Everybody is going up to at least 2.5%, Poland to 4.7% of GDP in military expenditures, because they are afraid. They are afraid that the Russians will attack, and it doesn't matter if it's Estonia or Lithuania, all of these countries will fight together regardless of what happens elsewhere. And you can say that the real hardliner now is Finland. A recent opinion poll showed that 98% of the Finns support Ukraine, the highest in the world, followed by Sweden, where it's only 95%. I mean, and then follows Denmark. So these are the countries that are really committed to Ukraine and understand the danger of Russia, and they will not hesitate regardless of what happens elsewhere. Thank you.
Okay, and thanks. Okay. So, former Deputy Secretary of State Steve Biegun, who served in the first Trump administration, thanks for being here. Thanks for letting me cold call on you. You can pay me back later for cold calling you. Sorry. Yeah. But just talk about Ukraine as an opportunity, but also I know there are people here thinking, what does a second Trump term mean for Ukraine's security? You served in the first Trump administration. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, so first of all, let me start by thanking the panelists for great presentations. And I couldn't agree more, Admiral, with your vote of confidence for Keith Kellogg. Keith was a colleague in the first term. He has all the skill set that you described, plus he's got the president's trust. And in a position like this, I was President Trump's negotiator with North Korea. So having the president's trust is an empowering thing, and it's going to really put Keith in a good position. You asked about the disposition of the new administration. Dan, I think Kurt answered it well. I can tell you with a high level of confidence that they have a very clear-eyed view of what's going on in the conflict. There's going to be as there always are in American politics and in the Trump world specifically, there's going to be a mix of voices. But the people the president has selected, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, Secretary of Defense, all the way through the teams they're appointing, have a very clear-eyed view of what's at stake here, and I think they're going to give the president some really good choices. I actually have a question I'd like to throw back to the panel, which is that all the things that you described, I think, are doable in the right course, but General Kellogg, and by extension the president, are going to have one major problem. Putin doesn't want a negotiation. Putin wants Ukraine. What do you think the president would consider if Putin refuses to participate in good faith in a negotiation that would deliver a just and lasting peace to Ukraine?
So the question is, what if he breaks faith in the process of betrays the conversation?
Or what if he never even agrees to negotiate?
Right. Okay. So Ambassador Volker, let me start with you. I do want to come back to Christina, because I do want to. We have a new government coming in Canada. I think that'll mean potential changes in the future as well. So I think I want to hear from her as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so Steve, thanks. That's exactly what I focused on when one of the meetings I had with the incoming team was to say you should anticipate that Putin will not negotiate in good faith. And moreover, you don't want to negotiate because what the Russians do is they create irrelevant issues and demand that Ukraine or somebody else do something about it. And we run around in circles trying to figure out how we meet that demand while they're doing nothing. And my advice is keep it as simple as possible. Just end the war. You're going to have to show strength and force, stop the fighting, and then don't negotiate with Russia about things that are not Russia's business. Like they don't get to have a say if there's a referendum in Kherson City. They don't get to have a say in the future if Ukraine's a member of NATO or not. Just don't negotiate those things. Convince Putin that we have the capacity and the will to make sure he doesn't win. And he's got to decide at a certain point to declare victory with where he is now. So I think that's what they should anticipate. I also think that, and you know the players far better than I do even, but President Trump does not like being taken for granted or ignored. And if he talks to Putin, as I'm pretty sure he will, maybe even today, and says, end the war, don't escalate, stop this war now, and Putin doesn't, drags it out, escalates, another,
attack on Kiev.
Yeah, another attack on Kiev with I'm trying to think of the name of the hypersonic missile. Thank you. That is just going to tick Trump off. I'll come back in the end with your question there, but also I wanted to come to something on defense and this side of things too. We are already seeing American companies invest in manufacturing in Ukraine. And this is going to increase. The Biden administration already lifted the ban on American contractors having their people in Ukraine. I think that this is something that we're going to need to do. And I think that President Trump is interested in shaking up the U.S. defense industry a little bit by getting new technology, smaller players, faster turnaround.
Yeah, this is a big part of the conversation.
Yeah, there is a frustration. There's a frustration with the majors that they're too expensive and they don't deliver on time, and there's always cost overruns. And I think that Ukraine has a great opportunity working with American change agents in the defense industry to really do what President Trump wants.
So Ukraine could catalyze change in the U.S. defense industrial base.
Yes,
Dora, do you want to comment on this?
I just agree.
But Dora, you talk to a lot of, you also, I think, also have a lot of connectivity with folks who are, I'm going to call it adjacent to direct defense. I mean, you're in the radio business, you're in the medic business. Could you talk, I mean, I suspect you also have some insight in some of the folks who are actually doing some of this drone stuff and the actual stuff that's, kinetic.
Yes, in fact, just a few hours ago, I had the privilege of moderating a discussion with a few Ukrainians about innovation on this very topic. And one of them, I don't know if he's in the room, Yaroslav Vashnyuk now leads an organization called The Fourth Law, which is developing software to make drones be autonomous. One of his earlier companies for which he raised more money was a Pet Cube that was a toy so you could, your cat could play with a laser while you were away. He had an easier time raising money for that.
UMAEF is an investor in Pet Cube. We were an early investor. We were a ground floor investor in Pet Cube.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
you're welcome.
But what you see is that rapid pace of innovation. And I think that's what any manufacturers of any sort of material, drones, autonomous drones, that's what's going to change businesses around the world for the better.
So, Admiral, do you want to comment on the question that former Deputy Secretary Began raised about, so what is Trump, if Putin doesn't negotiate or betrays the lies, which is, in my view, is highly likely, what are some of his security options he could do to kind of make, turn up the pressure?
Well, I think the ambassador hit it exactly right. This is going to be Trump's deal, which means he owns it. which means he is going to take great pride in delivering something that works for the U.S. and for Ukraine. The more that Ukraine mirrors the United States, energy dominance, drill baby drill, AI for the world, innovation in the defense sector to get us out of these massive, large defense tech companies that are basically profiteering from conflict. These are things that Putin will watch Trump do, and he will take pause on that because he understands that Trump is not going to have a deal be violated on his watch. He also knows, and the Budapest Memo is a great example, we're not very good at holding up to our own end of the bargain.
So the Budapest Memorandum is in 1994. We swore, a number of countries said, look, Ukraine, give up your nukes, and we promise, it wasn't a treaty, but it's like we promise on this piece of paper we'll defend you, and it was not honored, right? So if you go to Wikipedia, you can see it. So everyone in Ukraine knows what it is. Most people in Washington don't know what it is. And to the credit of people like Senator Risch, who's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, every time he talks about Ukraine, he talks about we did not hold up our end of the bargain in the Budapest Memorandum, and we need to kind of risk, make good on the. And so we're trying to we failed the Ukrainians.
The thing that Trump will back himself with is escalation dominance. It's the area that we don't have today. He will ensure that if there is a violation, he says, I'm going to do X if you violate this. He, in fact, means it, and he has the resources to do it.
So ATACMS going further into the country, or longer-term missiles, or missiles that can reach the other end of the Black Sea and take out their fleet in the other end of the Black Sea kind of a thing?
You've heard there's a lot of hyperbole out there, but I think Trump is going to tell Putin, stop the attacks or I will arm Ukraine for victory. And he could do that. Ukraine, had they been given what they needed, this would be a completely different conversation. But I kind of go back to what I said earlier.
Sorry, Admiral, have we been a day late and $1 short the entire war?
The entire war.
On terms of arming Ukraine?
The ends, ways, and means. You declare you need to defeat Putin, but then you don't give them the ways and means to do it. And then you, in fact, dribble it in so it feels much better than it really is. And you could argue about ATACMS or Storm Shadow escalating the problem for Trump. I didn't really see it that way. I thought it was what President Biden should have done a long time ago. I just wish he had done it sooner. Yeah. That being said, I think we're going to be at a position of strength at the bargaining table, and I think Putin will think twice about violating a Trump deal.
Okay, so Christina, 4% of Canada are Ukrainian Canadians. It's beyond, support for Ukraine is beyond politics in Canada. We're going to have a new government likely. Could you talk a little bit about what you think the new government will do? We have a microphone for my friend here. And there are any number of very fine Canadian companies that are investing in Ukraine or supportive of Ukraine. So, and Christine represents the Temerty Foundation, one of the sponsors of Ukraine House Davos.
Thank you. I'm going to keep this brief. Yes, we're likely going into an election soon. The Liberal Party in Canada is going through a leadership election right now. As you mentioned, 4% of Canadians identify as having Ukrainian roots. So before the full-scale invasion, 1.5 million Canadians identified with Ukrainian roots. Since then, we've let in hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to Canada. And so I'll just say that there always has been bipartisan support across all parties for Ukraine. A lot of that has to do with the large population of Ukrainians. If you're not Ukrainian yourself, your neighbor likely is, or your colleague likely is, or identifies that way. And I anticipate to have bipartisan support moving forward. No matter who wins the next election, I expect that they will continue the long history of supporting Ukraine.
Do you think Canada will increase its defense spending in the next government? Probably.
I hope so.
I hope so. I expect so.
Yes, I do.
I would expect so. I think every country is increasing their defense spending.
Good.
And so I anticipate that Canada will do the same.
Okay, great. Thanks. Now, Kat Valinka, women-owned business, Canadian entrepreneur. Kat, thanks for being here.
Are
you going to be serving your vodka later?
Yes, we are.
So if everyone's behaved themselves,
we do have
some of Kat Valinka's vodka, Ukrainian roots.
So we do have, we do have the network reception. Join us, please, 7 to 9, sponsored by AmCham. And we do have the best cocktails in Davos because Ukraine is the birthplace of vodka, and it's a women-dominated industry, and we are members of AmCham and the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce.
And it's a Canadian company, right?
That's right,
Yep.
a Canadian company producing in Ukraine. So this is going to be speed questions. Admiral Mike, you have told me that Ukraine has the opportunity to be the first energy-dominant country in Europe and has unique capacities that very few countries have. Please tell us more about that. Dora, please tell us about the 350 billion in Russian frozen assets and the work that Razum is doing to help with that. And Kurt, I have a special question for you. So I had the opportunity to speak to the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So this is the day before the CELAC conference, where 33 of all Latin countries and Caribbean countries were coming to his island. He is famous for writing to Putin the day after the invasion and asking them to stop the war. So he got a response, and he told me what the response was. And so this is from Lavrov 2 days after the invasion, and it was, a lean compromise is better than a fat claim. That was the response he got from Putin and Lavrov. And these Caribbean nations actually demanded that he stop the war. They actually stood up to Russia in that way. So tell me, what does this mean? A lean compromise is better than a fat claim in the negotiation table. So thank you.
All right,
Three questions.
so let's take those 3 questions. Admiral?
Okay, really quickly. I was involved in Ukraine before the war, actually exporting excess nuclear power to Poland because they had none. Part of the clean energy agenda that the Biden administration was pushing. The fact they weren't in the EU meant they weren't under some of the same challenges of decarbonizing. The reason they've been successful in this war, in my opinion, is 50% of their power comes from nuclear. They have a very robust energy mix of fossil fuel with some renewable energy. And I believe when the peace agreement happens, Trump is going to look at Ukraine and you say, you see that country? That's what America needs to be. And we'll be exporting Ukrainian energy globally. Well, and now you've given away my bet. So if you want to bet on something in Ukraine, beyond critical minerals, bet on building small modular reactors to power AI and hyperscale data. Because the home of AI is Ukraine, and nuclear power is associating with AI and hyperscale, and that is the perfect marriage in Ukraine.
Okay, Dora?
So great question. Thank you for that about the 350 billion in Russian assets that need to be put to work. I want everyone to recognize my colleague Yulia Ziskina over there. Hi, Yulia, who has been a tenacious advocate to make Russia pay. So you can all join the cause. Learn more from her. Find her right after this. Find her after the reception. Country by country, she's been working with colleagues across various organizations to really map out the legal framework for how the assets of the aggressor need to and can be put legally to use to rebuild the infrastructure that was destroyed by it. And that's that kind of innovation and imagination that we see in Ukraine that's changing the rules that we need to play by. Thank you. And that's part of our advocacy work.
Ambassador Volker, what the heck does that mean?
Well, fortune cookie. Who knows what that means? Lavrov is not a relevant person when it comes to Russia's war against Ukraine, or for pretty much for anything dealing with Russia's relations with the world. Putin is the decider. Putin is the action taker. Putin will decide if he thinks it's time to end the war. And Lavrov gets sent around to mouth off, but really has no role in Russian decision-making or Russian leadership. Now, what does that mean? I suspect he's trying to convey, well, if Ukraine would stop trying to be independent and stop saying it has an independent language and culture and identity and that it's older than Russia, maybe give up some things, then we could talk. I suspect that's what he was trying to hint at, but it's irrelevant anyway. Since you're meeting with the Prime Minister, but also if you're meeting with all these Latin American countries, the framing of all this is colonialism. What Russia is doing is colonialism. They do not view Ukraine as a legitimate independent state, and they want to take it over and fold it back into a Russian empire. Russia never stopped being an empire with the fall of the Soviet Union. And this is what this is about. So any of these countries in the global south that look at what's happening here should see themselves in Ukraine's position, fighting against a colonial power.
Great. All right. Let's go to my question I asked. Let me start with you, Andy. What's the biggest opportunity in the next 1 to 3 years for Ukraine?
It's risky to invest in Ukraine, but it's more risky not to invest. The number one opportunity in Ukraine is the people. What Ukrainian people have shown since the full-scale invasion is phenomenal. I mean, the resilience, what they've shown. And it doesn't matter what sector. I mean, you look at Lena, Horizon Capital, they have $1.6 billion under management in terms of assets in Ukraine and the region. I think there are just so many sectors. We've talked about the defense sector, the AI, the ag, the food, all across the technology, but I think it's the people. The people of Ukraine invest in the people of Ukraine.
Okay. Ambassador Volker?
So I wanted to comment also on Dora's point. Expect the Trump administration to turn up the heat on Europe on seizing the Russian assets. They are going to say, why are we spending our taxpayer money? Why are you spending your taxpayer money?
Yeah, Belgium, why don't you?
Seize this money,
right.
and a certain part of it, maybe half, should be spent on defense articles from the United States. I think that's where the Trump administration is going to come from on that. And any further U.S. military support to Ukraine will probably be in the form of loans rather than aid.
A lend-lease for Ukraine.
Lend-lease for Ukraine, but potentially in substantial proportions if we do that.
So, okay, trivia question. What year did the British pay back their lend-lease loans to the United States?
1977.
Even later than that,
Even
but yes.
later
But
than
let's
that.
let's
Okay.
go 1970. So let's say that is just the minimum, right? So that's more than 30 years. And some of the last dribbles were like 2006. But let's say. But my point is, if Ukraine has 30 to 50 years to pay back loans for weapons, they'll be able to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And future administrations have the opportunity to accept loan forgiveness.
Right.
So
President Trump has talked about thinking about Ukraine like a PGA golf champion, investing in a PGA golf champion. I don't. I've heard him say this.
Now, as far as the opportunities go, I would name a couple. One, Ukraine will become an energy dominant country in Europe, and this is all forms of energy. So we're talking traditional natural gas, we're talking oil, fracking, but we're also talking about wind and solar and renewables and SMRs, nuclear power. It's going to be a dominant energy country. So that's the first thing. And this is important for the European Union. I think everybody started in February 22 looking at Ukraine as a charity case. Oh, we have to help the Ukrainians. I think more and more people are going to see Ukraine as a solution. That we have issues in the EU with energy, with renewables, and Ukraine is part of the solution to that. Second area is going to be tech and engineering. The Ukrainians already are very good at this. I want to put in a plug for the American University Kyiv, and all of you should support the American University Kyiv. It is teaching engineering, digital engineering, global business management.
Is Dan Rice here?
Dan Rice, I don't believe he is here.
Okay.
But we are teaching that. We're doing it in partnership with companies. EPOM is one of our big backers for the digital engineering school. And I think that is an area we're investing in to develop and further develop the human capital of Ukraine. And this sector is going to be a very important sector for Ukraine going forward.
Great. Dora?
So my answer is people as well. Slightly differently, though. People because of the imagination and sort of ingenuity and drive that we see in Ukraine, not just in the past 2.5 years, but the past 3 decades and going back. And it ties to the engineering. But each of us, whether we're investing in a fund, each of us can make this bet very simply by hiring Ukrainian firms for any services, buying Ukrainian goods, putting in my plug for all my various Ukrainian-made things, and telling all your friends to do the same thing, because it's the imagination that the individuals are bringing to the world stage, that's the magic, that's the innovation. And we've sort of had a crisis of imagination, one could say, with some of our established players, and what Ukraine is doing is shaking that up.
Great. Admiral?
Well, real quick, about 2 days before the election of Donald Trump, the bond market told us that he would be better for Ukraine economically than Biden. Follow the bond market. I would say the defense industrial base, be it capacity building, be it revitalizing their industrial base, Antonov, Pivdenmash, and others, and then this unbelievable innovation in warfighting, which is actually peace fighting more than warfighting, that the rest of the world cannot wait to learn from Ukraine's victory against Russia. And then finally, on energy. I mean, those are going to be the great investments of the 21st century, and they're going to emanate from Ukraine.
Please join me in thanking the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you for this excellent discussion. And following up on Dora's, comments, we support Ukrainian small businesses and Ukrainian designers. That's why we have our annual tradition to keep our speakers warm in Davos. So, please.
Thank you.
Please also,
Thank
yes.
you. Oh, thank you very much. Wonderful.
Some
Thank
pins.
you.
Thank you. Super. Wow.
Thank you very much.
As a first timer, I'm extra honored. Thank you. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
When's next year?
Thank you.
Great.
And please join us. We will have a live stream from the inauguration of the President Trump. So please stay with us. That will follow up by the networking partnered with American Chamber of Commerce. Please stay with us, win with us, and stay for the whole weekend. Thank you very much for the excellent discussion.